let's kick off to Corinth, please.
Okay, I have like one primary question for like Rob here. If gender is what you're defining as, it's a grammatical referent to sex. How do we make sense of the term man up? Are you telling me like make more sperm, make more little gametes? Are you telling me make more X, Y chromosomes? What biological part of sex are you referencing with that term?
Just because there are other terms that may use the same suffix doesn't mean that they're the same as the terms we use, such as man and woman. So you could say manly, which would be another thing. Man up.
No, it's not the suffix. It's man up. I'm telling you to be more of a man.
Right. And so we would say there are traditional characteristics we associate with biological men. And so when I say man up, you're telling people to embrace those traditional characteristics.
And those characteristics are biological or social characteristics in cases like man up?
The characteristics would be characteristics that come from a biological nature that we normally associate with men. So strength. Do you acknowledge that men are stronger than women? That we consider that there's a biological reality to that quote construct?
On average, but I'm not sure how this is relevant to a case of man up. Are you telling me be stronger when you're telling me to man up, like physically stronger?
I'm saying like suck it up, right? That's what I'm saying.
But that's a different sense of strength.
Well, it's still a sense of strength. It's a sense of like willpower, strength, like constitution.
No, this is emotional.
All of those things that biologically we could say are traditional characteristics that have a biological characteristic to being closer to males.
Okay, so this is completely different. This is a social idea of strength here. This is be more stoic.
That's not true. There is still biological reality to why people are more biologically. Do you think males or females are more likely to be stoic?
I don't think it's biologically indexed. I think that one's entirely social.
So you don't think when someone says man up, explain to me, take the word stoic out of it. What do you think that term means?
I think they're saying start suppressing more emotions and fulfill a male social category. Be somewhat of a more like tempered person. These are
so do you think think that biological males tend to be more tempered and exhibit the characteristics that are more what we consider a male type characteristic? I can't remember.
Yeah, I have no reason to believe that this is related to biology over social roles.
Well, that's not true.
It
is that the social role that we associate with it has roots in biology. The same would be true of like sort of. Yes, right? Because we could reference, if we did studies on this, that we would see that these characteristics are more likely associated with males. So not just men
I agree, it's associated,
women.
Right?
It's not just associated, it's a reality with them.
Yeah, right? I want you to show the causal link to it being the biological aspect of it. I want to know exactly where the biology is acting there to show stoicism.
The causal link is that where do you think that the societal implications of what we consider masculine and feminine come from? Where did they originally come from?
I'm sorry, I don't know why you're answering my question with the question right now.
Because it gets to the root. It gets to the root of the fallacy of your way of thinking. I'll answer the question for you.
Okay, what fallacy? What fallacy am I making?
I'll answer.
You started making a fallacy.
Can you tell me a fallacy at least? Okay, all right, Corinth, settle down a little bit. Let's go through one at a time.
You said I'm doing a fallacy. I just want to know at least what fallacy I'm committing.
I don't have the specific. I will say you are making an erroneous assumption. Is that better for you?
Okay, where's my erroneous assumption when you made the claim I'm asking you to substantiate your claim?
Your erroneous assumption is that there's no biological reality into why we have social constructs of the ideas of things that are associated with masculinity and femininity. So the truth is that that these sorts of, we could call them stereotypes of what is male behavior, came about originally because that was most likely to be from male behavior. In addition, the entire conversation is irrelevant anyways, because the idea that we would use a term like man up to mean characteristics traditionally biologically associated with men, therefore we have constructs of what we assume manliness is still irrelevant to the question of whether or not gender would have some sort of connection and be an expression of sexual reality.
Okay, it's entirely irrelevant, and there are two things here. First, you just reasserted the position that I asked you to justify, so we have to go back into that. It's not an erroneous assumption when I'm unconvinced that this is a biologically enacted thing. That's you making the assumption that it is. I'm saying, hey, I don't have any evidence of this. Can you give me the case for this? And tertiarily, the third point you made, it is entirely related because this is the idea of social gender. This is a social idea of masculinity. If we're saying man up means this, we're having an entirely social idea of man here. If you can't give me why this is a biology thing, then you're poorly justifying why you think this distinction does actually exist.
I can you give me any example of where the notions of masculinity would have came from if there's no connection to biology?
General social realities.
Okay,
I don't understand how you asking me a question is you substantiating your point.
Define. So wait, is your argument that when the reason that asking you a question proves that if there's only one possible explanation for something, or it is the best possible explanation, then therefore that's the explanation we should go with? When you're incapable of providing an alternative explanation to my interpretation, that the reason that we have principles of what we understand masculinity to be is because it's connected to the biological reality of what males are, then that would mean that we should prefer our definition. Your inability to answer questions without glibness shows that you don't have a definition that would be more suited. Therefore, by default, I win the argument. Now, when you say it's because of general social constructed principles, can you define general social constructed principles and articulate how we got originally to these socially constructed principles? Were they completely arbitrary?
So, first of all, I'm not saying this is the answer to a question I asked originally. Second of all, you're the one who made the assertion, hey, we do have an explanation for why this thing comes to be. You made the claim, hey, it's because of this. I'm saying we don't have any good reason to believe this is the case over the alternative hypothesis. Both of these are equally as plausible. If you can give why this is the case, you'd be able to substantiate this. But you saying, oh, Corinth isn't able to justify it, therefore I win, isn't actually how this works, because I'm not giving you this is the case. I'm giving you an alternative case to show that you don't have the pure only option here. You have to substantiate why, which is, again, I'm confused as to why you keep answering questions instead of backing up your claim.
You aren't even able to define the term of which you defined as social construct. You can't define why it would be that something became a social construct. Is it completely arbitrary? Is there a 50-50 chance given any society that what will determine masculinity could be X or the opposite of X?
Are you going to answer the question that you were asked?
Yes, I'm answering.
We're going to continually try and pivot off
again,
of it.
I don't know if you understand how argumentation works, so I'll slow it down for you real quick. If we're asking ourselves a question, why does X exist? And I say X exists because of this. And you say, I don't think that you need to prove it. And I say, okay, the first thing we'll do is ask, is there an alternative explanation for why X exists? And I say, so can you give me an alternative explanation? And you say, no, you can't ask me questions. Then I'll say, fine. You are inherently saying that you're incapable of providing an alternative explanation, which means without any more proof, I could say if there's only one possible explanation, then we must accept that explanation is true. Now, when you do glibly give sort of an alternative explanation of, well, it's just a social construct, now we're comparing, okay, who would be more likely to be accurate in this scenario? You refuse staunchly to answer any reasons as to why that would be the case. I could get deeper into the biological reality if you would like, because of
I would like that. That's what I've been asking you for this entire time.
And then you will give me the courtesy of answering my questions. Fair enough?
Sure.
Okay. So because of the biological realities of males versus females, there's different reproductive strategies and different behaviors that become necessary because of those reproduction strategies, because of things like bone structure, strength, etc. So our social construct of men being more likely to be defenders, hunters, etc., you may say those are social constructs, but they come from a biological reality. The idea of having temperance and being stoic comes from that tradition, that we needed men traditionally to be less.
Rob, how many edges does a circle have, buddy?
Who said that?
Hold on, Duck. Let him and Corinth are having a good back and forth. I'd like to let them go, please. Thank you.
Doc, I know how you doing, my friend. So when we see that, right, that there's like sort of behaviors because of the biological realities, and men had to be the people that were trying to get more women to have sexual reproduction with, and their biological differences and strengths suited them more for being people that were more loners, hunters, things of that nature, where women, because of the reproduction system that they had to be more nurturers and be more communal, etc. We could see then that biologically it makes sense that men would have to suck things up more, because by the very nature they're going to be more loners. So there is a biological reality to the term man up. Now, can you argue to me, if there's no biological connection to the frame of social constructs, is your argument that there's literally a 50-50 chance that masculinity could have meant sucking it up, or it could have meant the opposite of not sucking it up? Why did it end up meaning the thing that you're saying that it meant through a social construct if there's no connection to biological reality?
Okay, so there's two things here. I never said no connection to biological reality. I said it wasn't caused by biological reality. Things can be connected to things due to like tertiary reasoning. We wouldn't say, well, thing influenced part A influences part B, therefore part B is caused by the original thing. This is just a complete error of understanding what my position was. Now, if we're saying, oh, it can be as loosely as anything influenced at all by sex, sure, we can entirely grant this to be the case. But then this means that whenever we have any person on testosterone, they're going to be engaging in things of that sex. Unless we're saying, oh, this heuristical category is only acceptable when Rob is instantiating it or when Rob is referencing it, but not when people like Melanie or Korinth are referencing it. If we allowed these secondary sex characteristics to be identical to sex or things that are referenced to sex, we can have this coherent idea of gender being distinct from what biological binary sex of the two modes of reproduction are. So you're equivocating at
no,
that
you
point.
can't, Duck.
Korinth is right, but you're missing something,
No, Duck,
Rob.
you can't jump in. I'm enjoying the conversation. You never really bring anything
About
I
up.
like Rob.
biological
Just to be clear for
I-
everyone watching, I
hold
like Rob
on.
interpersonally.
You know what? We're just going to speed date this.
He took Rob away. No.
There we are.
I thought I was going to speed date Rob.
All right.
It's
So, where were we on this before Duck interrupted? No, I'm enjoying this conversation, Korinth, immensely. No, because you've already admitted now that there is a biological characterization to it. You say, well, it would also meet that characterization if we gave someone testosterone. You're right. If we chemically alter someone to be more biologically closer to the characteristics that men have, then we would say, yes, they're more likely to engage in the behaviors that socially we look at through men. That's absolutely true. That wouldn't make them men. You could pump up a woman to the gills with testosterone, she'll never be a man, and yet she would be more likely to have characteristics that are associated with being a man because of the chemical makeup of what a man is that makes those characteristics likely to happen in the first place. You still haven't articulated. You just say, well, it could be tertiary, but you have no evidence to prove that it's tertiary or that tertiary nature of the biological reality isn't key to what occurred. It is clear that the best possible explanation offered between either of us that the social constructs exist because this had to do with biological realities of what men were, which then had the social constructs. Society was constructed about the biological realities of what people are. For example, even if we take out, quote, sex or gender characteristics, because of the biological reality of humans, we ended up thriving in communities where sort of communication is necessary, coming together is necessary. We need to have communities so we have access to food, water, etc. Those social constructs of like what a town would be or where people are more likely to live all came about because of the biological necessities of who humans are. The same is true of the characteristics we associate with masculinity, femininity, etc. While it is true that there could be exceptions to the rule, those characteristics, much like all stereotypes, started to exist in the first place for a reason because there was biological reality to it. When that's clearly the best reason, it's what we should prefer as the definition between sex and gender. This is going off on a red herring anyways, using a term specifically like man up to refer to a characteristic that we normally associate with men by definition. That's different than the concept of gender and the term of man-woman, because man up by definition means to act like a man, but that doesn't prove that man doesn't have a biological reality to it. In addition to that, you would still have to argue then if we don't accept that and it is social construct, how would you define the terms man or woman?
Okay, so I'm going to go work backwards from that. I'm going to use just because it's a little more fresh. So it's going to be relevant to this case. It's not a red herring because we're saying man up there. If man up is a biological term, if we're saying acting like a man is biologically indexed, then we're referencing you should be changing your behaviors in some biological way. If I tell you, hey, go man up, I'm not telling you to like change your reproductive pathway. At best, I'm telling you change some secondary sex characteristic, but generally I'm referencing some social idea. Now, if we're saying, well, the secondary sex characteristic is caused by the actual sex, then any case we're referencing the secondary sex characteristic must mean that would be affirming the consequent. This is a logical fallacy. When we're talking about this, we can have a second cause of these secondary sex characteristics, like HRT, where if we're saying, well, any behaviors outcome of these secondary sex characteristics would be indexed to sex, then we're referencing trans women as actually being women because we're referencing that sex there. Now, I don't think you think this is the case, which is why I think you have an actual distinction between these two concepts. Now, if we end up going back into the actualization, it's going to repeat into this idea of if we have women being, I'm just going to use man as like the alternative of how you defined a woman, adult human male. Is that okay with you? Thumbs up for yes, perfect. So if we have adult human male there, with male being biological sex, if we mean reproductive pathway, primary, like the evolutionary biological definition, where small gamete form production, large gamete form production, that creates the binary. If that's how we're defining male there, then when we have these secondary sex characteristics being derived from, hey, testosterone allows us to function in this given way in society, a trans man who's on testosterone is going to be manning up and acting like a man in that sense. Now, we can have man mean something other than biological sex there, have it mean the social role, have it mean even things related to secondary sex characteristics, and that's still distinct from the original idea of man.
It's easy to defeat this argument because let's take the word man up out of it and use something that's synonymous. If I said act like a man, would you agree that that's sort of part of what man up means?
Yeah, I think they're like identical.
And so therefore that doesn't disprove that we should interpret man as the biological reality of male. Right? The very definition of the term says act like a man. That doesn't prove that man must mean something that's not biological reality.
When you say act like a man, what do you mean?
When I say act like a man, I mean that men are biological males, so you should act like a biological male and the characteristics we normally assume with them.
So when we say biological male, what are the categories of biological male?
Like if I tell you act like you need to have the eye of the tiger, act like a tiger, right? Am I saying that there's not a static definition of what tiger is? Actually, then tiger's a social construct. Then it means being fierce and it means being attacking and defending your child.
Yes, Rob.
No, it doesn't.
That's what we mean by act like a tiger.
Correct. Act like a tiger means that you should act like the characteristics we associate with tiger. But that doesn't mean the definition of the word tiger doesn't have an objective reality to what the scientific data is on what a tiger is. We don't say tiger is tiger. We don't say tiger actually means things that think they're a tiger. We say we could objectively see that that's a tiger. And when we say act like that, we're talking about the characteristics that we see that we know from the objective reality of what tigers are. The same is true of saying act like a man. Man, just like tiger, has a biological reality. Saying act like it means what we associate with how that biological reality makes you act in the real world.
Yes, and that biological reality is not the only thing that can cause you to act like that. And that's the reason this is affirming the consequent. If you have some other things, you can be acting like a man. You can be more man-like without actually being any more male. You can have this social idea.
That's true. You could be more tiger-like than some tigers with actually being a tiger. That doesn't mean that we say that the word tiger is just socially constructed and it doesn't have a stable meaning and it's self-referential.
There could be multiple meanings.
I'll ask you one more time, right? Can you define man and woman?
Yeah, I can give you multiple definitions for each if you want.
Give me the definition that we should prefer.
You guys can't break shit down in layman's terms, can you? At all.
It's going to be like largely context-dependent, right? Like, if I'm an evolutionary biologist, if I'm defining man, I'm generally defining it in a biological sense. I'd probably do something like the sex that produces small gametes. But if I'm talking to you and I'm saying man up, I'm not talking about small gametes in that sense of man. I'm talking about those behaviors. There are two reasonable definitions we can use here, and this is going to be a reason why man indexed to gender is going to be distinct from man indexed to sex.
For a moment. Hobie, I know you're new here, but I have a very big annoyance with people who interrupt while people are talking. Thank you.
All right.
So I'll just finish with this. Again, you conflate the term man up, which has nothing to do with the definition of man is, just like act like a tiger has nothing to do with the biological reality of what a tiger is, right? The definition that we should prefer of man
is I'm using a different use case of it.
Well, you could say, well, we could use the term man to mean a bunch of different things because I use the term man up, but man up isn't the term man. Man up by definition means to act like a man. And so therefore it's by definition talking about the characteristics of men. It's not speaking to the biological reality of what the term man means at all by definition. Right. And again, like the problem is for all terms of utility, like in the ways that we would use this most, it is clear that in any study that talks about outcome differences between men or women, it's always referring to the biological nature of it, because we understand that it would be absurd to talk about self-referential when we're talking about income disparities between men and women or prison disparities between men and women. It would have almost no utility if what that was actually asking for is income disparities between people that identify as something, but there's no biological connection to it, versus income disparities that identify as the opposite, but there's no biological reality or connection to it. So in all senses, in utility, practicality, etc., it makes sense. And you still can't get away from the act like a tiger example, where it just
because I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
Which proves.
No, it doesn't prove what you're saying. It proves what I'm saying. We have a social idea of what a tiger is distinct from its biology that we're referencing there. We have a second use case of tiger, meaning some set of characteristics that you can enact. Being
That's
fierce,
untrue.
being
When
aggressive. We're not saying grow fucking stripes, Corinth. You're not telling me go to the Bengali jungles and climb into a fucking tree and catch a bird out of midair. You're telling me engage in these secondary characteristics. You're using this as some sort of general behavioral standpoint.
Right. Just like saying man up just means act like a man. Saying act like a tiger, we could say.
Yes, but we're not talking about the biological definition of man there.
Please, we could say that you could insert the term tiger up. Yet still, anytime I say the word tiger, we understand that what I'm talking about is the biological reality of what a tiger is. When you use a term like tiger up or act like a tiger, you're talking about the characteristics that we normally associate with tigers. That doesn't change the fact that the only definition for the word tiger when it comes to the animal is the biological definition of what a tiger is. Now take the exact same argument with the term man and woman.
No, so you have to index it when it comes to
what I want to say to this. I want to give Corinth, I apologize. I want to give you the final thought on that little exchange, Corinth, since that was his question. And then I do want to move over to Dustin because I believe he had something quick to say.
Okay.
Corinth, to you. I apologize. I interrupted.
This is just agreeing. There is this second use case. When we're talking about act like a tiger, we're not referencing the biological idea of tiger. You're not telling me to go grow the stripes. You're not telling me go run on 4 paws. You're telling me act in some behavioral characteristics way. Just like when you say act like a man, you're not telling me to act like an adult human male. You're not telling me to grow those chromosomes. You're not telling me to biologically age myself up. You're not telling me to like stop being a cat or something. You're telling me, hey, engage in this behavioral set that we identify as masculine in our given society. And that's what is referenced when we're saying man in a gender sense. If we're talking about like the other scientific idea of these studies wouldn't have utility, there can be easily these ideas of utility. If we find out that trans men fall into the exact category of where men are, a lot closer to where men are in terms of earnings and things like this, and trans women fall closer to where women do, this would actually tell us it's not as biologically related. It would be something a lot more social. These kinds of data points, if we are able to clarify between the two and see how these things line up, will actually be useful, not anti-utility. Okay,
I'll just say real quick, thank you for agreeing with me. You're right. Saying act like a man is a completely different concept than what a man is. Just like saying act like a tiger is a different completely concept than what a tiger is. When we say tiger, we always No. Saying act like we're saying act like a tiger, which is the characteristics associated that we see with tiger, right? The biological reality of what a tiger is and what we mean by saying the word tiger is always the same, right? If I say act like a football player, or I say, act like, I don't even know, an adult. Adult's not a good example either. But you can see the point. You're inserting the word act like and saying because we say act like something, that refers to the social characteristics we associate with it. Therefore, there's multiple definitions to to what the term itself means. That's not true.
It is. It's just not the biology. And you caught yourself there. You even were about to say it, but then you realized I'm not saying there are multiple biological definitions, even though there might be in different fields of biology. But in this given case, we have a societal idea of what a man is. We have some idea.
Say tiger. What comes into your head?
Oh, you're both killing me. I wanted to because it has been
30 more seconds, please.
30
what comes
more
into my mind
seconds.
is the Survivor song.
Real quick. I saw a tiger.
Bengal tigers coming to my mind right now.
Wait a minute. There's no circumstances where you think that what I actually meant was I saw a person that was fierce and acting like a tiger.
There might be a case where that happens, right? It's going to be context dependent.
So we would still say, so you can see the exception doesn't disprove the rule. We know what a tiger is.
No, it actually does because it's not a categorical. It disproves if it's a categorical claim. If it's a heuristic claim, our positions can be reconciled.
I'm good.
If you're not making the categorical, there only is one definition of male, then it does disprove your claim because this is a second use case of male. If you're saying there can be multiple use cases of male, then we just agree in the first case. We agree, hey, man can be referential to gender, some social actualization of characteristics, rather than just being an adult human male.
And Corinth, you are being booted to the back. Sarcastic Saints says with a big 5. Corinth,
fight,
stop
Melanie, fight.
whining and stop acting like the Furby. Go drink some almond milk and enjoy 5 minutes in the back. Oh,
Melanie, fight for me, please.
I am
So I do have a question.